The next person we'd like to award is, to honor, is a woman who has been a lifelong activist in New Jersey. She's really dedicated her life to the struggle for justice. And these are the kind of people you don't hear about, the kind of people who show up time after time, even when nobody else is showing up, because they know that it matters. And Jessica's not only an activist fighting for social justice here, but she's recently been on delegations to Belarus, to other countries. In 2017, she was in Sochi with Caleb at the World Festival of Youth and Students. She's really a very dedicated activist who's really been fighting for justice. So I'd like to invite her up to accept her award.
Thank you so much, Caleb. One of the things I have to always say positive about him is that he always accepts the fact that we can always agree to disagree as long as we are all focused on the same most important things, like the anti-war movement. As mentioned about Belarus, David and I were lucky to meet up with the leadership of the Communist Party in Belarus in Minsk. But before I get to what exactly took place and what we discussed, I wanted to give a little bit of a background. So I noticed that in 2017 and 2018, that the intelligence agency was using CIA transgender ideology to really go after the left. Their focus was really to destroy the left, and the question was what was going on. And I realized at the time that the economy was collapsing. That's what it was. And I began to follow not just the economy of the United States and Europe, but also China, because you see, half of China's markets are towards the West. And so if there's a crash in the West, that would mean possibly 50% unemployment. And that could, of course, create chaos, instability, and of course, counter-revolution. And so I began following, as I mentioned, Forbes magazine, the British Economist, and suddenly there was talk about the fact that in the next Great Recession, 48 million Americans would lose their jobs. It was slated for 2019. I predicted that it would probably be in February of 2020. And in fact, on March 16th of 2020, the stock market crashed by 3,000 points and did not come up. No one talked about the fact that 48 million people lost their jobs because everyone was talking about COVID. COVID was a distraction, by the way, from, of course, the recession.
That's right.
And I attempted to contact many different parties from RCP, Workers' World, PSL, POP, to discuss the fact that we have to reopen government offices. 1 in 4 children were going to bed hungry because people couldn't collect unemployment or SNAP or food stamps. We had 700,000, mainly women with children, just in New York City who were homeless. But none of these left groups would do anything. They were more concerned with immigrants delivering their food by Uber Eats. Very disgraceful. At a certain point, I noticed that David was talking about organizing in Newark, and I want to give a shout out and hand to David. He was out there with Annie, and they were in Newark. I joined them, and we got hundreds, maybe over 1,000 signatures to reopen the food stamp office, okay? And we delivered that to Donald Payne Jr., the Congressman of Newark. And at the same time, I was organizing with Eric Rossi, Joe Myers, and Richie Deegan in New York City, and we were also demanding that the governments reopen, and we were demanding jobs now, okay? And also in New Jersey, the lockdown movement would have been dead. Literally, it was 2 people, me and Mr. Ross, and we created the anti-lockdown movement. We had over 1,800 people in Trenton, and again, demanding we reopen the government. Only 2 parties I'm aware of really discussed the question of the lockdowns and how they were related to the worldwide depression. One of them, of course, was the Communist Party of the Philippines, Jose Sison. By the way, they don't believe in germ theory. They believe in germs, but not germ theory. They believe in terrain theory. And so they were against the lockdowns. They were against the vaccines on that principle, and saw it as a way to just stop protesting, right, because of high unemployment. In the case of the Communist Party of Belarus, they also put out a statement, and it was very fascinating. Now, me and David were getting health care in Germany, the eastern part, and we decided to visit Poland, and we decided to have a delegation. Let's go to Belarus, and we went to Minsk. And I have to say, we were very, very welcomed by the older comrades. They were just wowed that we came all the way from the United States. The leadership that was about my age, they were very hesitant. They wanted to know if we were there to promote transgender ideology, and we were like, no, we're not here to promote that. And they're like, yeah, okay, you know you're here to promote that, right? You're here to discuss this, aren't you? And we were like, look, we are not going to discuss men and women's bathrooms. I'm not going to discuss pedophilia, which is, because after all, as you're aware, if a child can consent at 6 to have any kind of surgery, they can consent to having relations with adults. So we understand it's pedophilia. We're not into bestiality. We're not into any kind of bourgeois degeneracy. That's not what we're here. We're here to discuss the statement that you put out concerning COVID-19. And then they asked, wait a minute, you're members of the Communist Party USA? And we were like, no. Oh, okay, that explains your position on transgender ideology. So after we had a few chuckles, our conversation turned to the economy. And they discussed the fact that, as we all agree, whenever there's whenever there's a depression, whenever you have a depression, you're gonna have war, austerity, right? And starvation, of course, right? And so at that point, the conversation turned to the digital currency. And as we discussed, the gentleman said, you know, everyone talks about how the digital currency, how it affects individuals and how they will be locked out. No one discusses how it affects nations. What makes Belarus, Belarus, although we are a capitalist nation now, is the fact that we have social programs like Social Security and housing and guaranteed employment. Part of being part of the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, is that we will have to give up all of these programs, all of them. And that's what's going to take place on a worldwide scale. And just like individuals can be locked out, well, if our gold is no good, if we can't use American dollars in the black market, we are really trapped. What can we do? Either we capitulate to the austerity, or we fight, and we'll be fighting basically a battle with the central bankers of nearly every nation. So their message for us, and this is the message I like to give here to everyone, was that it was very imperative, one, that we organize some type of new left, some kind of party or popular front, because war is coming, a world war, because it's the only way to get out of this depression. Second, I mentioned the organizing against the war. And the third thing was organizing against the digital ID and digital currency. That to them was very important that we fight for. And you know what, if we don't fight for it, it's gonna be very difficult to have rallies, because you know what, they can cut us off from our funding and our food and money. And so this is the fight that we need to organize for. Thank you so much for everything, for everyone, and let's keep up the good fight. And let's make sure there's no war.